So if you ask, where did blank come from? Where did this thing come from? You get an answer. And then from that answer, you go, where did that thing come from? And then you keep going further back and back and back. What do you eventually come to? So I found that regardless of whatever it is that you ask about, eventually you're led back to one particular source or a singularity. You can call this Kia, you can call this source, you can call this God, the multiverse, the Big Bang, whatever it is you would like to call it. Things have an origin point, but I think that this origin point split itself into many different pieces, pieces that we can comprehend and that we can experience, and pieces that we can't due to our limited understanding, just so that this singularity, this source, could experience itself more deeply. So, by the way, my name is Tenebrae, and I just wanted to express my thoughts currently on the nature of the universe or God or whatever it is you want to call it. Not just for you, but also just as a documentation of my notes. I have a couple of things that I wanted to say here in my notebook, and I just wanted to do this in one take so that I could practice speaking out loud as well. So, the part that we can comprehend about the nature of the universe is that there was a series of evolution leading up to where we are now. I don't just mean biologically, but I mean in terms of the complexity of matter. Suppose things were quite simple at the beginning of time, and then over time these structures evolved into where we are now. If you think about it in terms of biological references, perhaps the very first form of life was very simple and not complex at all. And then over time, through evolution, we've become what we are today. That is to say, we're able to think a lot more consciously, and we're able to co-create with the world around us. These are two very unique things to humans, and specifically, humans are the only ones that can do this to such a great extent where we change a lot of the physiology or the way that our world and ecosystem works. Because if you think about it, I do think that there is a consciousness in certain objects or landscapes, not in the same way that you or I may be conscious, but more in the sense that it simply acts according to its nature. That whether that be weather patterns or like an environment like landscape, it simply acts in accordance of the natural laws around it. Now, when you have things that are alive, like say plants or animals, that is a higher level of consciousness. Maybe not will in the same way that you or I do have, as I mentioned before, but more in the sense that they're following their instincts, they're following their programming, and they're trying to simply survive or act in accordance of their nature. So, moving up consciousness, where we are humans, a part of our nature is to co-create. That is to say, like, we are creative beings. We create tools, we create shelters, we create art, and we create weapons, etc. That's a part of our existence. And I believe that this aspect of creation, this is a really huge reflection on the universe creating everything. So I want you to once again think about the impact of humans on our society, on our world. The earth has everything that we need, right? Like the earth is our sandbox, it's our playground, but humans are the ones that are or have the most impact on how it is arranged and rearranged. If you think about it, all animals and all plants do this to some degree, but for some reason, humans, because of our conscious ability, because of our ability to communicate and work together, we just have the ability to change things so drastically. So I think that something about us being creative beings, something about us being able to communicate with each other and somehow just impose our will on the world around us, I believe that that is a reflection of the creative divine spark within us, the part of us that connects with Source, that is the source of all things. Again, you could call this God or the universe or Kia, whatever it is that makes sense to you. So now that we understand that this is a reflection of the universe, why do we exist? As I mentioned before, I do think that it's because the universe wanted to experience itself deeply, or more deeper than it could have if there was no consciousness in this universe. I think that a part of us experiencing time, especially in a linear way, is because, at least from our human existence, the further we go in time, the more complex our technology is, the more complex our way of thinking is. And I think that this complexity is a part of the agenda or the reason that consciousness exists, if there is a reason at all. Because honestly, my other thought process was that everything truly is random, and that this level of complexity is just a random byproduct of it. Where if you believe in the multiverse theory, this just happens to be a universe where life exists, and due to extraordinary circumstances and because of probability, it was bound to happen eventually. This just happens to be the universe where it exists. So now I want to ask, why are we alive? Why are you alive? I asked Spirit, and this is unverified personal gnosis. The reason why we exist is simply to live a life. To simply, as I mentioned before, experience. Whether it is good or bad, it just adds to the whole experience of consciousness. Theoretically, we do not have to achieve some type of great goal. We don't have to do anything particularly grand, even if we feel like we should. There is technically no consequence to whether we do it or not, to the universe or God or the soul or what have you, like the eternal part of the soul. But I do think that there's a part of our consciousness, our ego, the human iteration of you that exists now, that wants to assign meaning to it. And I do believe that in assigning meaning to it, you give life more importance, or because you consciously assign it meaning, it has more value, or you're adding to the experience of humanity, adding to the experience of consciousness, just because you will something. Like you have this idea that you want to birth into this world. To be clear, it's not that the universe or God has a specific plan for you. It's that you have plans in your mind that the universe can co-create with you, but you have to decide that this is the universe that you want. You have to decide you want to co-create this with reality or with God. So I think, once again, that there's a part of the spirit that is eternal, that will continue experiencing life, death, rebirth. but I think that there's a part of the spirit that is our current iteration, that is our ego, that's trying to transcend that. And I think that each time the eternal spirit comes back, there's the potential for that ego to live beyond its physical container, like to transcend the idea of life and death, the rebirth cycle. I do think that whenever we were born into this life, there are certain agreements that we made that we have to honor, or that we agreed to face so that it could develop our spirit in some way. But I do think that it's meant to show up in different forms throughout our life, depending on which path that we take. I'm gonna state the idea of like nature versus nurture. Specifically, let's talk about something complex as gender identity or sexuality. There's this idea that people cannot choose their gender or sexuality, and that it was something that's automatic from birth. I do think that a part of this is true. I do think that a part of it also has to deal with our personal expression and how we decide we want to handle that. Let's say being born queer into a family or like a physical, cultural place, location where that's not accepted or that's allowed. I do think that having that type of struggle was meant to develop your spirit in some type of way. And in particular, finding meaning from it will help develop your spirit, develop your understanding, and it doesn't just develop your ego, but it develops the eternal part of you that will be born and reborn over and over again. You may not remember that aspect of existence directly, but I do think it contributes to what I wanted to describe as like a transcendent wisdom, the thing that makes people feel like an old soul. Again, everything that I'm saying is more subjective than it is objective, so take it with a grain of salt. I ultimately do think that it is up to us to decide what our reason for living is, what our relationship with God or the universe is, and whether this iteration is meant to have a particular meaning to us or not. Part of the fun of existence is trying to figure that out, trying to enact your will, because I do think that there is a true will that each individual has on this earth, and you can live in accordance of it, with it, and you will know it's for you because it feels like a flow. Or you can ignore it or just bypass it, but you will live a life that feels out of flow or that will feel more difficult. I think that's everything that I wanted to say for this video. So if you've listened to this point, thank you very much. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.